good to see you.
I see you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us and participating in the interview. You've got a fascinating background and career, so we look forward to hearing even more about it. And I'm going to hand it over to Robert at this point and step out of the meeting. So I'll let you guys get on with it.
All right.
So, Tara, hopefully when you step out, we don't get disconnected since you're the host.
Right. I'm actually not going to turn it off. So.
Oh, you're going to drop. Okay.
Yeah.
Video off, and you can eavesdrop if you want. Oh, we can't hear you, Tara. So if you're expecting us to hear you.
You.
Sorry. I was saying you're scheduled for 1 hour, but if you both feel like you want to continue, I'm pretty sure you can. We'll just keep going. So.
All right.
All righty.
Excellent.
I sent you a lot of my story because my children have been asking me, so I've been writing questions and responding to their questions. So I guess they've been doing an oral history of me. So I kind of forwarded a little bit of one of their questions of how I became an architect.
Awesome. So Gil, as Tara might have mentioned, in 2016-17, the chapter began this oral history project in an effort to gather, obviously, the stories of our members for a couple of reasons. One, they're just fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And two, it just helps to convey the depth of experience and helps our members understand one another. So that's the purpose. So I have a series of questions here. I'm not going to ask every single one of them. We'll just kind of let the conversation evolve. But what I would like to do just initially, because this session is being recorded. First of all, you don't mind if we record this session, do you?
No.
All right, thank you. So I want to kind of start with general biographical questions, and then we can get more into specifics about your career, you know, the kinds of projects that you worked on, the types of firms that you worked for or in or created or ran. And then we'll just kind of let the conversation unfold as we're having this fireside chat.
Okay.
So the first one, my name is Robert Uli, FAIA, board member of American Institute of Architects Santa Barbara chapter, interviewing Gil Garcia, AIA. So Gil, you might just give us your name, birth date, you know, just general biographical, where you were born, that kind of stuff.
Okay, my name is Gilbert Garcia. I was born in 1939 in what used to be the County General Hospital, and lived in Goleta up till about the age 17. First memories I have, of course, of living in Goleta is living in a ranch where my father was a ranch hand, and then buying a house on Matthew Street under the flight path of runway 7. And you can imagine how that got noisier and noisier as the planes began to go from prop to prop jet to jets. And so I lived there most of my youth, being part of the workforce of Goleta Valley Agricultural, which my father was an immigrant from the ravages of the Christian Revolution, 1925, 26 revolutions of Mexico, mostly in the states surrounding Jalisco and that area. Shortly after the Mexican Revolution, which ended in about 1924, and about 1925 they started to tried to dominate the Catholic Church, of which the hacienda owners and a lot of the priests took up arms, and that was called the Christian Revolution. Lasted till 1929. But that's what brought my father to the United States, is fleeing those ravages upon burning the hacienda where he was working. He was a field worker in a big hacienda in the highlands of Jalisco. So that's what got him to go on a freight train and with a bunch of other guys and come to Texas and cross the border there, and be held as a refugee for a while until he was cleared from any disease or anything that he might have contagious, and then he did the migrant circuit to Central Valley, San Joaquin Valley, Salinas Valley, Goleta Valley, kind of the loop until he met my mother in Salinas Valley, got married, and my older brother was born in San Joaquin Valley, Fresno, and realized that wasn't the life of migrant workers, so they ended up settling in Goleta, where I was born in 1939. So, you're mute.
Thank you. From your childhood, let's say before high school, college, that age, what are some of your happiest or fondest memories growing up in Goleta, Santa Barbara?
Well, growing up in Goleta, of course, we were growing up very much in the Mexican culture. My father was a migrant, very strong cultural traditions in the Mexican campesino workforce, which he was a campesino field worker in Mexico. There's a tendency to group together, help each other. And basically that's what we did in the area called Tortilla Flats, which was Fairview Avenue, Goleta, where a lot of the migrant workers lived and kind of helped each other, and we became extended family. We knew each other, and we worked the fields. And I started working when I was 7 years old, picking lemons, and later on planting tomatoes and picking beans, walnuts, and going to school with black hands from the walnut stain. But the cultural shock, of course, came when from very close-knit Mexican traditional upbringing to then go to school and realize there's a different language being spoken in school, which was a frightening situation, a terrifying situation. I still to this day remember clinging to my mother's leg, "Don't leave me here." But teacher was very nice, picked me up and calmed me down. But that was when I began to realize there's a whole nother world out there. And it was a struggle through that time to adapt to that new world, because I continued to have my main foot of the culture in the Mexican culture, but trying to be pulled into the Eurocentric culture. And by the school, we were separated in a school in Goleta, which is now the community building of Goleta. That was Goleta Union School. We were separated in a little room in the back, all the Mexican migrant children kind of immersed into English, which was very difficult for us, because another shocking experience is not being able to say in English, "I need to go to the bathroom." Mm. And so that was something that I was saved by somebody who knew a little English. Became my friend after that. But those are the type of shocks that one after another. And as I began to blend more into that, about the second grade, we were moved to the big school where we were immersed, where we were now going to be in the mainstream of all the children of the landowners, of some of the workers. The ones we worked for, the big landowners and ranch owners. A lot of their children were there. I recall having a difficult time blending into that, because immersion is difficult to learn English, and that caused difficult times in being able to study, being able to learn. Matter of fact, as I said in my article to my children, when they asked me how to become an architect, the history of my life, I told them that on the, what was it, the IQ test, I came out Buro. Buro. But then I told them, but there's a genius in me. So I was a Buro genius. And later I realized that I had to work on that genius. It came out later in life. But it was a very, very difficult transition from that culture that lasted for quite a while. It was emotionally draining, not understanding, frightening, creating feelings of low self-esteem, thinking that we were just there to be the workforce for the big white Anglo landowner.
Mm-hmm.
Saw how our fathers were treated, sometimes not very nice, yet they were the king of the house in our house, so we looked up to them. So it was kind of frightening to see how they were treated at times. But that's part of the. I just try to emphasize the cultural shock that evolved from that time in growing up in Goleta. Later in life, my father then was a very hard worker. He had a very hard work ethic, and that's what he taught his children, very hard work ethic. But he also, because of his hard work ethic, he got interviewed by a major in the prisoner of war camp in Elwood, with Germans and Japanese were housed as prisoners of war. I realized later on that the U.S. had the policy of spreading the prisoners of war throughout small communities, so they can get a feel, these prisoners of war, of the sense of a community, small community living. And my father then got the job of being a crewman, ahead of a German crew to work in the fields where he worked. And one of them was, walnut orchards and lemon, things like that. So there I learned a little bit about even a different culture, and had an interesting experience there where they were kind of snobbish to, they're after all, they were the super race, they're snobbish to us, but later became the greatest friends when they realized my father's tacos and burritos were so delicious.
Have you spent the majority of your life in the Santa Barbara area?
All of my life has been the Santa Barbara area. Yeah, I went to graduated in 1957 and recognized that I didn't want to continue doing field work. So we worked in flower nurseries as I grew older, as a teenager. And on Mora Mesa, there's a lot of flower nurseries there, and continued to plant tomatoes and things like that. But I realized when I graduated from high school that I definitely didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't know what my life was up. So I joined the Air Force. And so I spent 3 months in Lackland Air Force Base and joined the Air Force to see the world, get a different experience. 3 months, 3 months in Lackland Air Force Base, Texas is about the only time I left Santa Barbara, came back, and they stationed me in Oxnard Air Force Base, where I was there for 4 years. So I saw the world, all of Oxnard.
From your early days, childhood, who influenced you the most? Who did you look up to?
Well, as I mentioned, my father was a great storyteller. He was somebody that in the Mexican culture, he's the king of the house, and he makes all the decisions. But he had a great work ethic and integrity that I guess is common among the campesino and the work fields in Mexico, because they have to trust each other. So you become a community of people helping each other. It's called extended family. Your family is not only your aunts and relatives and uncles, It's also all your friends that become part of your extended family, and you help each other.
Mm-hmm.
My father would be sick, couldn't take me to work to pick lemons. A neighbor would take me. We would go to the summer to Salinas Valley, where my father met my mother, and we worked in the carrot fields there to earn money for schools. And the relatives there took us to the carrot fields to work, and we made money for our. So it was a tough life in that my father had to work about 2 or 3 projects just to be able to 2 or 3 jobs just to be able to support the family. So we were called in to help in support of the family as youngsters, and grew up with that hard work ethic. But he would tell us stories. I remember that influenced me a lot. There's stories about overcoming difficulties in life through hard work, through honesty, through ethics, good ethics. And I'm sure you've heard the stories about the king kind of marries a daughter off to the greatest noble that can do all the deeds and all the challenges. And this peasant entered, and through his integrity, hard work, he won the princess. Stories like that would inspire us to work even harder and do the best we can. My father always said he had a philosophy of living the moment and do the best you can in every moment that you live. So just do the very best you can, and the future takes care of itself.
That's a good motto.
Yeah.
Siblings? How many siblings do you have?
There was 8 of us, all of us, 4 girls and 4 boys. I was second, then my sister, and a brother, then another sister, and a brother, and the youngest one, a sister. Yeah. And they all live here, except for my oldest brother, who he joined the Air Force a year before I did, and got more into the aerospace industry. So he got more into the defense type of mentality, where you had to create sometimes conspiracies to ensure that the government was spending money for defense. Yes, he was part of the Bircher Society, and so he grew up in a whole different philosophy than the rest of the family. But see, he now lives kind of isolated in Oregon with his food in the garage and rifles, waiting for the revolution, I guess.
Yes. Well, a revolution of some sort, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Are any of your siblings in the design profession at all?
No, none of the siblings are in the design profession. One was a plastering contractor. One went into the army, into Vietnam, then got hurt, so he's in disability. But a lot of my sisters worked in the biggest job creator in Santa Barbara, in Goleta at that time, was the Goleta Lemon Packing House of all the orchards. So Sunkist Packing House, it was a cooperative of all the orchard owners, created this packing house. So my grandmother, my 2 sisters worked there. If you go to the Goleta Museum, you will see a picture of her and me in the 2nd grade in the 1st grade there. So we're part of the history of Goleta, because my father got selected as the pioneer family, recognized as the first work person, first field worker or farm worker that got recognized that way was my father. So that was in 1990 that he got recognized, and so our pictures are in the Goleta history book about our life and in his life, and so we're part of the Goleta history that way. Prior to that, just a lot of landowners got recognized.
Did you grow up with any nicknames, a nickname stick that somebody called you and then it stuck?
Well, As a young boy, my name in Spanish is Gilberto. Gilberto. So the short for that is Veto. So I was called Veto most of my life. Veto most of my life as a child.
Hmm.
But as I grew older, my nickname became just Gil, instead of Gilbert, Gil. And everybody to this day just calls me Gil. And I'm a dual citizen of Mexico because of my father, and there I am Gilbert because that's my birth certificate says Gilbert, so I had to register as a Mexican as under Gilbert.
Hmm. How did you meet your wife?
Well, let me see. That complicated story on that one. I'll have to go a little bit of part of growing up is being a little, and part of being part of a large family, and part of the hard work ethic, and a mother who's trying to take care of 8 children. Very, very difficult, and very difficult. And sometimes they would have, they you get emotional about it, but try not to show it to the children. They would cry at times because they didn't have enough to feed the children. But so through that struggle, we didn't get a lot of what you call, might say, hugging or something, or because there was so much stress, we were required to work. So that then created me to look for love in all the wrong places. And I, I got married very young and not prepared. Had 2 wonderful children from that marriage, and went and got a divorce. Then I got married to a foreign student. Didn't think that American women knew the Mexican culture very well. He couldn't stand it, so we weren't compatible. So, and that was another problem in that that married a foreign student, Italian, which resulted in another child. And that child is now an architect living in Santa Barbara. And my son from the first marriage is architect, well-known architect in the San Jose area. And my daughter from the first marriage is a child clinical psychologist working for the state of Nevada in Reno. So very successful. I did have a child very young, was married to the mother. He became, he's now 62 years old, has 3 beautiful, I had 3 beautiful grandchildren from that side of the family, and 11 great grandchildren.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then I met my wife Marty, who's the love of my life and has been an inspiration to me. After I had gone through a lot of turmoil in my life, trying to find who I was, in my early architectural career, I owe a lot to some architects. At that time, Art Moser and Grant. I worked in Art Moser and Grant as a draftsman, thinking that all I was ever going to be was a draftsman. I didn't realize I could be an architect until I realized that as a draftsman, I learned enough that I was telling young architects how to draw buildings and how to, teaching them. So I said, wait a minute, maybe I can become an architect. So I took my exams and I passed and I became an architect, not knowing that that was something that I realized I could do, but I didn't plan it to be. It just happened because I realized I can do it. But during that time, there was a lot of, because of the structure, because of the turmoil I had in my life, through the culture shock, even to my later years, it was difficult to overcome. So I had to go through a lot of emotional therapy, mental therapy, and eventually spiritual therapy to end up growing emotionally, recognizing how to handle those emotions, and then recognizing that all the answers spiritually, all the answers inside of me, not out there. Once I learned the power of my inner spirit, then I was able to achieve the highest goals and meet my wife that after 40 years, I'm very happy married to my wife.
I assume that is the person that's been walking behind you.
Yes.
What year did you become licensed?
think it was 1976. Yeah, 1970. No. God, I think it was sooner than that. I think I opened my office in 1976.
1972.
Huh?
1972.
1972 I became licensed. My wife just reminded me. Say hi, Marty.
I'm out of your way.
Hi, Marty.
You're in my bedroom.
It's surprising during this pandemic how bedrooms have become offices and conference rooms, and I'm fortunate enough to have a home office. The screen you see behind me is just a graphic,
Yeah.
but my home office is completely separate from the house, so I can quote, leave the office at the end of the day and go home, which is just across the driveway, and not feel like I'm, at the office 24/7.
I wanted to mention, I did mention that I owe a lot to the architects in Art Mosier and Grant, Peter Phillips, Leo Peterson, Mr. Mosier, how much opportunity they gave me as a craftsman, and how they encouraged me, and how they took me under their wing, and how they saw that in my confusion, I needed counseling. So they directed me to the counselors I needed.
Mm.
I had no idea what counseling even was at the time.
Yeah.
So I owe a lot to them for making me grow up.
Mhm. What did you enjoy most about drawing?
About drawing?
Yeah.
Well,
We don't do drawing anymore. It's all by computer and plotters,
Well, I enjoyed getting a blank sheet of paper and begin to draw on it and begin to see evolve into a building or a plan. And I enjoy that I focused a lot, because one of the things my father taught me, do everything you can is do it well. I focused a lot on my work. I think they used to call me the machine as a draftsman, because I wore so many pencils down drafting. I was so focused on my work. And it was just something that about my work when I was drawing that I could almost visualize it completed. And I was anxious to get there, to that completion. because I can see it in my mind's eye what it was. And so I enjoyed getting it and ending that to that completion and getting there. So it was a very gratifying experience.
That I believe that's what really makes an architect, a person who has the ability, I suppose to some degree, innately, you can learn these things, of course, but it seems to me that innately, if you can visualize a two-dimensional drawing in a three-dimensional object, and kind of as you're drawing it, this is what I loved about drawing. I refuse to use a computer to draw something. I still have a bucket of pens and a stack of pencils and an eraser, because I like that tactile connection with the paper and the drawing and the pencil. But, I often discovered that as I was drawing something much like what you just described, I was seeing it in 3 dimensions as I was drawing it in 2 dimensions. And that's the part that I really loved about, and still do love about drawing, and miss the fact that our emerging professionals, don't have a callus on their finger where the pencil has been worn over the years, they don't have any calluses from drawing.
That's true.
The mouse.
I still have mine. It's here. I can still see
Yeah,
mine.
I do too, right here. Yeah. And as you absorb the art of drawing, a little pinch of your T-square and triangle is 3 inches or 5 inches or a foot. You know, you don't have to pick the scale out. You know, you just have, like playing a piano, you have this muscle memory
Oh.
that tells you what the dimension is at whatever scale you're drawing. And so I've always found that to be fascinating. Tell me some of your experiences working with, was Art Mosier Grant the only firm you worked with, or were there others?
I started working with Art Mosier Grant, and it's an interesting experience as to how that happened. I'll tell you quickly, is that when I was in the Air Force, in Oxnard Air Force Base, I didn't get to see the world, but I did. It was a blessing in a way, because I had I always feel there's some mentors in my life. I had a mentor as a roommate who was encouraging to go to school. So encouraged me a lot to go to school. So I would go to Ventura Junior College, where I took math, and I found out I was pretty good at math. And I took mechanical drawing, drafting. I took descriptive geometry, the thing about visualizing things, about looking at things from different angles, and in descriptive geometry, and drawing it from one perspective, another perspective. So I was pretty good at that. And that kind of gave me the idea, well, maybe I want to be a draftsman when I get out, a mechanical draftsman. I don't know what I wanted to be when I got out of this service. So I took my portfolio of mechanical drawings and went down to Raytheon and see, you know, can I draw? Here's some mechanical drawings. And I quickly realized that it was amateur compared to what some of those guys are doing there. So I said, you have to take a lot more classes. So I ended up taking a course. I mean, I took a job in a sales firm that it was on State Street, that ended up selling to military bases, clothing, hats, shoes, and things like that. And I would ship and receive. Very, very ungratifying job. I didn't really like it, and the boss knew it. So he told me one day, so what do you really want to do? I said, well, I showed him my portfolio of mechanical drawings. I want to be a draftsman. He said, oh, okay, I play golf with Mr. Mosier of Art Mosier Grant. I'll tell him, maybe he'll want to. So he did. He told me, so I got this young man who wants to be a draftsman. And so I got an interview with Mr. Mosier, and he looked at my drawings, said, well, a little different than architectural drawings, he says, but I can see you can draw. We can hire you as an office boy, and you learn the basics of architecture. And at the time I said, oh, okay, well, I guess that's a start, better than the job I was doing. So I took over the office boy's job at that time. And he said, well, what do you know? He says, about architecture. He says, I don't know, nothing. He says, okay, this is a ruler. He told me this is scale, and this is started looking at, and you, his 1/8 inch was a foot and all that, and started explaining all that. That's how I started learning my architectural training. And so I worked there for about 3 years under the tutelage of I said I wanted to be an engineer. I said that seemed more exciting to me than an architect. So I said I want to be an engineer. So they had an engineer upstairs, an architect engineer, Elvizioni, who now passed away. He was mechanical, electrical, and just structural. So I worked with him, and kind of alone upstairs in an office with him. Grouchy guy, kind of and me when I did things wrong. It was a big deal. I put ductwork, D-U-C-K, ductwork instead of ductwork, D-U-C-K. I don't know what the big deal of that was. Anyway, before I was, everybody got a laugh out of that one. But as I went to make prints, I was also the office boy that made prints. So I would go outside. In the time they had a sunscreen, the old sunscreen that you put it on a platform and you put glass and you roll out the sun, and that developed the plan. You brought it back in, you put it in an ammonia tube. Yep. So I did a lot of that travel. In going there back and forth, I passed by the architects and draftsmen downstairs. And I was looking at their plans, and I saw how much more they seemed to be having more fun, joking, laughing. And so I said, this seems like more fun. And I was just amazed at some of the drawings I saw on their boards. I said, oh, gee, I think I want to switch to become an architect. So I asked, and they took me downstairs, and then I became the intern draftsman, which asked a lot of questions. I went to night school to try to better my skills. I took electrical, mechanical courses, structural courses. Peter Aylen at the time, I took his course 3 times, went over my head the first time. Second time, I didn't understand any of it. The third time I took it, I finally understood it. And so I took all of the courses, and just because I had the hunger for knowledge, and I would take work home, and I would try to draw at home, and I would ask questions, and the architects would get a little frustrated with me and say, just shut up and draw and learn by your mistakes. So I shut up and drew, and I made mistakes, and pretty soon I began to become a job captain, and then pretty soon I was able to have my own little job, my own little project. At that Cynthia Wood Stables, I did the Cynthia Wood Stables out in Montecito, drafting at that time, and the trainers, horse trainers house in four sheets. Now and get a permit with 4 sheets. Now you can.
Yeah. 4 sheets barely deals with the words the lawyers want you to say.
So that's when I began to get bigger projects. I got bigger projects, and pretty soon they had draftsmen under me. And before I knew it, these draftsmen took their exams, and they passed and became architects, and they would still ask me questions. And that's when I realized that, hey, I can become an architect too. So that's how it evolved and happened.
Now, you mentioned the exams a couple of times. Did you only take them once? Did you have to take them multiple times?
I had to take the first, after 4 years, I qualified for the first part of the exam. And I took them and passed them. That was a qualifying exam. And then the second time I took site plan, design, building design, and the professional portion. I failed the site plan, but I appealed it because I thought it was pretty good, and they liked my appeal, so I won. So I got passed. The design was, I think, was a little nursery school, and I passed that pretty well too. So I got that. I did have to take it twice though, because the first time I realized that I was designing and had all my solution, but didn't have enough time to draft it. I had run out of time. And the guy said, well, it's a great solution. You didn't submit it in time. So this next time I timed myself, and I was able to really delineate my drawing and get it in and present it. And that's when I passed the final exam. Then I went to the oral exam, and I got complimented for my good grades in taking the exams. And then I actually became an oral examiner myself for about 8 years for the state of California, and interviewing architects at their final exam.
The design exam for you was 12 hours long. Was it the whole day?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was for me too.
Oh.
And you're right. It was more about time management than pretty much anything else, because if you don't get the required drawings done by the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
That's true. And that's what happened to me the first time. I had a pretty good design, but I couldn't render it in time and present it. So,
how did you enjoy being an oral examiner?
I think I met somebody that was an oral examiner, and said there was a way to apply for that and volunteer for that. I said, okay. So I sent in my request, and I got accepted. And it was an interesting time to be an oral examiner, in that you not only interviewed young architects, you also interviewed foreigners coming in from different countries, and you begin to realize different countries are more like contractors rather than architects. They do sketches and they build their building according to, and the designer as they're building it. It's almost not they get very permits very easily, but it's most they sit on a director's chair and direct the workmen how to build it. So it's a different philosophy. So I remember I had to, and a lot of them didn't know about the earthquake design. Since I had taken all the structural, I knew pretty well how earthquake resistance was. So I would have them write papers and come back to me, and because California is a lot about earthquake design, they didn't know anything about that. So I would give people a task, and they'd come back and give it to me, and I'd ask them if they can understand the concept. So.
I think you said you worked with Art Mosher Grant 3 years. Where did you go after that?
I worked for Art Mosher Grant 14 years. 14 years. I had a little break in there where there was a developer. I think it was only about a year I worked for a developer called Isley Investments, when they were doing mini warehouses all over the state.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to learn more about that, so I worked with them for a year, and I traveled all over the state doing mini warehouses and designing mini warehouses. And I've designed here in Santa Barbara, the one in Carpinteria I did, and Ventura and Stockton, all over the state of California. And then I went back to Art Mosher Grant, and then I got interested in knowing more about how a developer that comes to you to do drawings, what his thought processes are to hire an architect. So I used to go to the beach at noon to play volleyball, sand volleyball. They used to call me the flying burrito because I would jump pretty high. And I was pretty good at it, beach volleyball. It was every noon we'd go to play. So I met John Blankenship there, who also played volleyball, and he was doing development. So I got together with him, and I said, well, let's do a little house together. And I said, okay. So we did. He bought the property, and I did the drawings for him, and he paid me, and then he sold the house. And then I saw where he got a heck of a lot more money than I did on the plans. And I said, well, next time we're going to do partnerships or become a partner, half and half. And I realized how lucrative that was. I ended up getting into the development business with Blankenship for a while. It was called, to this day, I think, well, for a while it used to be famous. Blankenship Garcia houses used to be famous all of Santa Barbara, Light and Hope Ranch and Montecito and big and houses. Then so I got pretty busy. It was pretty lucrative. As a matter of fact, I remember one time driving to my architectural office in a new Porsche I just bought. We're looking at it. Where'd you buy that with a drastic salary? You know. So I took my bosses out to see houses I was doing out in up in Eucalyptus Road, and they said, "Oh," so they even thought about getting involved in a little of that, but they never could get started on that. So I ended up deciding to go on my own to concentrate on development. And that's when I opened my office in 1976. But prior to that, I had been the job captain or the architect in charge of the Santa Barbara Savings Expansion Program. Very, very rigid, a very rigorous expansion program throughout California, San Joaquin Valley, San Francisco area, up to Palm Springs, Inland Empire. Rapid expansion program, and I had to travel a lot to do that. And since I had my Porsche, I would travel everywhere to go to all these places, and I got to know the client pretty well and work with him very closely. We had dinner together and all that. And then when I left to go on my own, they didn't have that personal touch that I was giving them. So then they hired me to continue the expansion program. And that's when I realized, wow, yeah. So I had to hire a big firm. So I had up to 40 architects now. Expansion, I hired a big firm doing development and expansion for the Santa Barbara Savings. And that was that was kind of the heyday of my firm, where I bought 2 airplanes to fly in all directions for our projects, and a little twin-engine Cessna and a Cherokee Lance, and had corporate pilots that flew us in all directions to be able to respond to the planning commission meetings I had to go to and all of that. So it was an exciting time, but stressful at times.
Mm.
I think it was a pretty stressful time, a time that very successful and lucrative time through the development, but as well as this that my blood pressure began to go up a little bit. So so I had more help to do it. But then that all came to an end when Santa Barbara Savings got took over by the feds.
Mm.
So the savings and loan debacle back, I forget the date and years now, but it was pretty bad. So that left me with just my development work, and plus I needed to get more local work to keep all my architects busy. And that's when I realized that I had to get more involved in the community, because I was so out there, not in the community, that people didn't know who I was, and people didn't know, some people didn't know I was an architect. And so I got involved in nonprofits, university work, university affiliates. I became involved in a lot of community affairs.
Mm-hmm.
Through that, I began to get a lot of jobs within the community. At the university, I was president of the university affiliates. I became, through Rotary, I got some bank jobs through Rotary, all the different organizations. My wife was also got involved with me in a lot of nonprofits, Fiesta, Boys, Girl Scouts, I should say Girls Club. And through all that involvement, I realized that it was a gratifying thing to be involved in the community. I realized, hey, that makes you feel good. So I began to feel, so I got more and more involved. And before you knew it, I was in one of the nonprofits that got involved is the Sister Cities, Santa Barbara, Puerto Vallarta Sister Cities. I've been active in that since the 1980s, and that's and I became a member of the Sister Cities International at UCS at Washington D.C. So I began to expand my knowledge, and so then I was in Puerto Vallarta when somebody got a call. Where I got a call and somebody said, "There's a vacancy on the city council. Council member had to resign, and your name keeps popping up." So I said, "What?" I know. Why? I have no interest in being a politician. He says, matter of fact, I have bad taste in my mouth on politicians. Well, somebody said, well, you're more of a statesman. So I came back, and then to my surprise, I had a group of people that came to see me that wanted me to run for council. So that kind of surprised me. So I said, okay, well, if you think I can do it. So I ended up applying for the position, and I won the position as a councilor, and I served 2 years, and then I served 8 years after that, getting reelected twice with the highest vote each time. That was a very gratifying experience in that it taught me a lot about, I became president of the Local Governments Commission, which is a statewide organization, and that's made up of board of directors of council members, mayors, and board of supervisors throughout the entire state of California. In Sacramento, they're the ones that did the Awani principles, and I was involved in some of the Awani principles discussion and all of that on traditional, mixed use plans. We were ahead of the curve on what people were talking about mixed use and talking about walkable communities and all of that. It was all part of the Local Governments Commission theme, and trying to educate the public on how to get more walkability, even talking about how to reduce obesity through it, and how we need to get campaign to get people to believe in it. And so I brought some of those ideas back as a city council member. Some of them were I fought through a lot of them. For example, I did one of the biggest battles was I wanted to close State Street because I think we needed more of a pedestrian mall on State Street. Well, I had the business people on State Street almost want to run me out of town. They hired an attorney to fight me and this and that. And I didn't realize all you need is a pandemic and they'll close State Street.
Yeah.
But,
So the AIA has a program called Citizen Architect. The definition of a citizen architect is an architect who is involved in their community, either through government or elected office or appointed position or serving on community boards like Architectural Review Board or HLC, etc. So, serving as a council member makes you a citizen architect. And so the question I have is, do you think from your architectural practice and background that gave you a different perspective on issues that came in front of the council in a way that might have been different from your former or your colleagues on the council?
well, yes, it did. I think that I recognize that, and I wrote a lot of papers on it, by the way, and some of them got published on livable communities, livable cities. But one of the things I realized is what a problem we had in not celebrating our diversity. Here I was a Latino architect on the city council, and immediately the first thing I did was a Celebrate Diversity Task Force. And I brought people in, and we had some speakers come in and talk about, and then there was a report that came out on what we needed to do to celebrate our diversity. That report was a fantastic report because schools got involved, county got involved, everybody got involved in that report, but they never funded execution of the report. They never funded the execution, so it ended up being put on a shelf. So I have that report to this day that has great ideas on how we become a better community celebrating our diversity. That's one. The other thing is that Santa Barbara does not have what I think is the root grassroots strength of a community is its neighborhoods. Mm. And how we plan within a neighborhood, how we engage people in the neighborhood. I did the East Side Study Group as one example, and that was a very successful East Side Study Group. A lot of people got involved in how to do the East Side, Milpa Street, and all the problems there. So all of those were things about how to improve neighborhood connectivity, neighborhood planning. Then I tried to get the city council to put a neighborhood services department to institutionalize it as part of planning. So it would bring county schools and cities together to give all the necessary services to a neighborhood needed for that neighborhood, and do a study of that neighborhood, what it needed, and that neighborhood services department would bring a neighborhood center right in that neighborhood to be able to distribute. And that became we would then do budget money within the budget to be able to fund that study, and then that study would bring other money in. If it's a study on how to solve gang problems, you'd get Justice Department money, nation money. So it became something that did it. Now, while I was in city council, I was vice chair of the Human Development Committee of the National League of Cities. So that I traveled all the United States, look at successful projects. So some of these ideas that I had were not original. They were ideas that I brought back from very successful projects that people adopted. Washington, for example, has a neighborhood development center, a neighborhood services center in their community. Then they have neighborhood funding for each neighborhood plan. They put the plans together. They have a neighborhood group that looks at all the plans for the entire community. The interesting thing is that when you bring the entire community and neighborhood plans, a wealthy community say, wow, that neighborhood needs more help than I do. If I bring that neighborhood up, it's going to help my neighborhood. So I'm going to get my money and I'm going to give it to that neighborhood. So you begin to recognize the diversity. You begin to celebrate the diversity by understanding all the neighborhoods, and we have neighborhood plans come to one. I could not get that done in Santa Barbara. I tried, but it hasn't happened to this day. But I did get the circulation element rewritten in Santa Barbara. Circulation element was based and that came a lot of ideas from my being a local governments commission, chair of the local governments commission. Circulation element has to do with how you plan circulation around land use, so that land use circulation can happen, can be concentrated. Put it this way, circulation can create more ridership and buses and things like that if you able to get a good circulation element that locates the routes and everything, like rubber rail, they call it. Curitiba did that in Brazil. So it's a lot of that studies I brought back. But through that, I was able to redo the circulation element with the vision that alternative modes of transportation shall become so successful, so attractive, and so available that the car would be an option instead of a necessity. And that circulation element is in function today. A lot of things you see are because of that circulation element. So I feel very proud of having been the one that spearheaded that circulation element. I also spearheaded across from the housing on top of parking. Was a plan that I pushed for very hard, because I think, why have dead buildings? Have live buildings and then have little shops around the parking and hide the cars all inside and go down a couple of feet in parking, but put a housing platform and make it a live building. I fought for it on that parking structure across from the library. And I didn't get the parking platform, but I got housing next to the library. so at least I got a little token of that. But it's an example. They were telling me that I was too urban, that my thoughts were too urban. I said, wait a minute. In the Awani principles, it tells you that if you reduce the environmental footprint, you need some density for environmental footprint, but you need the transaminium idea of having cars a train come in, a light rail or a bus come in, even if it's into a lobby to pick up people of a high density apartment. You do that in Holly Apartments in Pasadena. That was a study that we did also at Local Governments Commission. The light rail, they built it before the light rail was built, but they built it around the future light rail, and now that light rail goes right through the lobby, picking up people. So my ideas were too urban, but I see now that some of them are getting to realize now.
A man before your time in some regard, I suppose.
But talking about citizen architect, I was on the city council for 10 years. I was on the APR for 10 years, and I was a city housing authority chair of the city housing authority for 6 years. But for 10 years, I was on the city housing authority as well.
Well, we've been talking just short of an hour. Anything come to mind about your experience, looking back, that you'd want to share with emerging young architects?
Well, I'd say my experience is very different from the emerging young architect experience. And my experience came something that evolved. I would say that to any person, not just to young architects, but to anyone, that make sure that you are a complete individual. By that I mean each one of us is a trinity. We are an emotional person, we are a mental person, and we are a spiritual person. We have to be balanced in all of those to really live life to the fullest. You will not be able to know your destiny until you really know your spiritual identity. That will guide you in your destiny. But you need the emotional part of you to enjoy and to live in excitement, and the mental part to mentally think about the process and how you're going to accomplish it. But you need that visionary of the spiritual identity to give you that vision to fly to your highest potential. I believe that through my uh, therapy that I went through, I discovered that through my therapy that I went through. I will say, when I was so confused, the architects in Art Mojo Grant tell me, "Well, I have this this therapist you got to go to." Well, he was in emotional therapy. I got to get in touch with my emotions, and then I got in touch with my emotions, and I was so confused because I didn't know how to handle my emotions. So I got well. Now go to this mental therapist. He'll tell you how to kind of rein in your emotions. And fine. So I got mental therapy, and that kind of helped me. And I'm okay. You're okay, and all the things. But the real discovery of who I am came when I met this wife of another architect friend. We took our license together, Richard Johnson. He and I got our license together.
Mm.
I think Richard is now chair of the planning of the ABR in Cabrera. And he took me home one time, and his wife was terminally ill with cancer.
Mm.
I walked in and she looked at me and said, "Oh, hi, Gil. Richard talks about you all the time. But Gil, I must tell you, look, you're very confused, aren't you?" He says, "Why?" "Well, I see your aura going in all directions. It has no focus." He says, "That's what you got to get a hold of your high self to direct above you, and to your mental. You got to get lined up." And I said, "You have to know what your mission in life is, and you'll find out if you get lined up with your spiritual identity." Well, I had no idea what she was talking to. I thought she was kind of, I didn't understand. But she said, go to this place, and they will help you. And I said, "Oh no, not another round of therapy." So I walk out of my office, on the back door of my office in Hermosa Grant, and there was the place for me to go.
Mm.
So I thought, somebody must be guiding me.
That's a sign.
That's a sign. So I went in, and that changed my entire life. As soon as I was able to connect with my higher self identity, I then became a council member. I became then more involved in community. I became more of a mentor. I became more concerned about others than myself, service above self, and I began to give more of myself to others, and that's been the most gratifying part of my life.
Awesome. Have you thought of filing a nomination for AIA Fellowship?
My wife has. I never had. Yeah, she's mentioned it a couple of times. I mean, I look back at my life and all the things I've come from, a son of an immigrant, to an architect, where a lot of my little friends at that time, took the wrong road and took, substance abuse and things like that. And I was able to go in the right pipeline and get out of it. And because of my father's good training, hard work ethics. And so, I thought I have a good story. And so maybe I might do that someday.
Well, if you are interested in that, I'm the champion of fellowship nominations in the chapter. So if you're interested in sitting down and exploring that in more detail, I am happy to kind of help you navigate through that process.
Well, I'll be happy to do that with you. Yeah. I think
since 2012, we've been able to have at least one member a year since 2012 become a fellow.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, there was a 30-year gap from a member becoming a fellow in 2012. So something very dear to my heart. It's, first of all, it's challenging. I think you and I, in our path to become an architect, have had a similar path, and that is no real formal education. Don't have a college degree in architecture. We've come through what I guess you could describe as an apprenticeship, working for architects, learning with our boots on the ground, becoming licensed, being members of the chapter of AIA, and then ultimately for me in 2015 becoming a fellow. None of those things did I think were possible, for a kid, just working his way through the profession. But it did. So I'm a huge advocate for, if the College of Fellows of AIA are going to let me in, then they can pretty much let anybody in. So I'm happy. I'm happy to sit with you. When you want, be an hour or so, we can just kind of walk through what the process is and how much work it is to get there. And you're right, it's all about telling your story, and you have quite a compelling story. We're not quite sure how these oral histories, as we gather them, will be, for lack of a better word, packaged so that someone can hear the story. It might just be we post this recording online on the AIASB website, so people can just click on it and just listen to you and me talk. But I'd like to show you a 9-minute video that represents our first oral history project as a means maybe to inspire, what we might do with some of these stories. And like I say, it is only 9 minutes. So I have to get Tara's attention. Hopefully she's eavesdropping, because she'll have to open up the screen share for me to be able to do this. There she is.
I'm here.
It says that I can't share my screen, so I think you have to enable that.
I'm going to give you share screen. Oh. There you go.
All right, so let me share this. It's about 9 minutes long.
Okay.
The American Institute of Architects Santa Barbara chapter launched an oral history project to capture the stories of its members. This presentation is a result of that effort. Richard Bliss Nelson, AIA, was an active member of the American Institute of Architects, serving as the Santa Barbara chapter president in 1967. Nelson was born on November 5th, 1922 in Omaha, Nebraska to Oscar and Peggy Nelson. He was an only child. From an early age, Nelson was fascinated by automobiles and aircraft, a passion he kept his entire life. The family moved to Los Angeles in 1923. Due to an extreme housing shortage, they didn't stay long, returning to Omaha within a year. With the activation of the draft, father and son were called to duty. His stint in the Army included deployment in the D-Day beaches of Normandy. Richard and Terry were school sweethearts. They married November 1st so that Terry could travel with other military spouses while Richard was deployed. After the war, Richard began his architectural career.
Born in Omaha. We came to Hollywood in Vine, and my dad was given some land to build his first house. During his career, Richard Nelson had an opportunity to work on many interesting projects. What follows represent just a few of those projects, beginning with a locally well-known little building while working for Edwards and Plunkett Architects. This charming little structure, known locally as the Madame Rosinka Palm Reading Building, is a perfect example of the Spanish Revival details so commonly found in the southern areas of Spain, and embodies the Santa Barbara style that so strongly illustrates the city's identity. While with Riggs, the firm completed many large-scale residential projects.
Most of the practice focused on contemporary architecture, but occasionally a client came along requesting a design in Spanish Revival style. Richard Nelson was skilled in providing what the client requested. This is a simple, constructed, uniquely designed structure. Designed under the leadership of Lita Maria Riggs, we see design features that can be found in later Nelson projects. As an example, the telephone pole structural elements, a novel idea of Nelson. This was the first major commission for the architect's practice. Boat storage building in San Diego. Its unique design allows the lifting of boats from the water directly into the heart of the building.
And my father really enjoyed the detail, the ultimate detail of architecture.
This modest single-story residence also doubles as a working studio for oceanographic photographer Richard Cleveland and interior designer wife. Architect Nelson often used telephone pilings to support his buildings, hovering them over the ground below. This was an effective protective measure for projects near bodies of water. This single-story contemporary residence demonstrates many features found in Richard Nelson's work. The clean lines, simplified symmetry, and the intricate detailing render this project with a sophistication found in many of his projects. A common element used for hillside houses was to use the main building as a cover for the automobile. Here we see the architect's own house, the simple, clean line detailing found in so many of his clients' projects. Here we see Nelson's signature detail, bridge over a pool.
The yacht club had a bad spell, and all the rest of the buildings wasn't bad. East side of the harbor were without walks, the decks, some of the decks. When we were designing the building, we designed it with pilings that would hold up against anything, and it did.
The Santa Barbara Yacht Club has withstood both the test of time and storm to continue to be a cherished venue for its members and the community. It is a signature piece of architecture to the Santa Barbara waterfront and harbor. You know your work has made an impression when it's included in a comic strip. This project represents what Richard Nelson considered a major achievement. Church complex meeting the needs of the members of the Presbyterian congregation. This complex includes a main sanctuary, fellowship hall with supporting spaces, and church administrative offices. In later years, the church added a school and smaller prayer chapel. The unique touch of Nelson was to organize the main sanctuary around the cross symbol of the church. Only visible from the air. The project interviewed Richard Nelson in August of 2017.
Wow, that's impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't
it-
know why. I would just say that I don't consider myself some, famous designer or anything like that. I think more of my history has to do with the evolution of a man.
well, maybe that's what the title of the piece would be. Uh, I would say probably, just knowing, as you've been telling your story, the focus would be a citizen architect, someone who has, built a bridge between a community and a public, um, and Richard wasn't, one of those star architects, like Richard Meyer or Barry Burkus, or those are the bright stars that everybody looks to say, oh, that's an architect. But there are thousands of architects in the country that are doing some great work and have terrific stories. And every story is unique and worth telling. And I think that's what motivated us to do these oral histories, is to capture these stories. And while the Nelson story is in video and really is our first one, there are many more stories to be told that, and maybe we don't send them to video. Maybe we do, it all depends. So, we certainly appreciate your service over the years. Appreciate you taking the time to tell us your story so that we can record it. And, it would be interesting to add to this story, if you have them, pictures when you were a kid, early days of Goleta, pictures of you over the drafting table, wearing those pencils down as you were drawing. If you have any of those photographs and you're willing to share them, we'll add them to the story.
All right. Well, I'll look through my archives and see what I can find along that line of as I will.
I see Tara's come back.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. So thank you again. I appreciate your time, and we'll certainly be in touch to follow up.
Okay. And let me know when we get to about your on the fellowship thing.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Thanks, Tara.
Tara.